I mean, I think it'll depend on the office, but I think the people who really don't come back might miss out. I think there's a lot of conversations that are going to happen in the office. And I think to really get ahead in the business and to be more involved, I think people will have to have some kind of presence. We surveyed our employees, and I can tell you, I think it was like over 90% said 1 to 0 days a week they wanted to do in the office.
Wow.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast.
Another Byte.
Hello, I'm Sophie Law and welcome along to Another Byte. This is the YouTube show for MSPs who want to improve their marketing and grow their business. Every week we dive deeper into another episode of the MSP Marketing Podcast with its host, Paul Green, who is here again like a bad smell. But this week we're not going to talk about work. Well, not yet. Anyway, Paul, because on the podcast this week you were talking about the importance of not talking about work. So actually asking people about their real lives. Some of the facts you said you had learned about your colleagues blew my mind slightly. I mean, that one was in a band that had had a song that had actually been in the charts. And it made me think, I wonder if I ask people enough. You know, you always say, how's work, don't you? And talk about work. And if you're the boss, it's kind of easy to forget that you should care about the other stuff as well.
Yeah, because people, like we were saying in the podcast, it's all about the people, isn't it? And I distinctly remember on our Zoom and Slurp call, it was Ian, our developer.
Also, horrible name. Let's never call it Zoom and Slurp again.
Okay, we'll rename it for this year then, because actually this year you're going to be part of this call because you're part of the team now. So
okay.
It's Ian, our developer. So Ian's 50. He's now he's in a Zen point of his life, you know. So he's really into meditation and well-being. And, you know, we were half an hour into this Zoom call and each of us had to say something that no one else knew about them. And his was, he said, yeah, so I was in this trance band in the early 90s and we had like a top 20 hit. And then someone found it on YouTube and they were playing the hit out on YouTube. And it was, if you don't know trance, it's all that kind of kind of music. And it was all it was just a bit strange, that was, yeah.
But investing, you know, can be a bit tricky. I mean, you were saying you sort of bought everyone a drink, and I thought that's a really nice thing to do. But is it people appreciating their boss putting their hand in their pocket? Or can you do it in other ways if you've got a smaller budget and you think I can't afford to buy everybody on my team a drink?
Great question. And it's you're right. It's not about the money. It's the thought that counts. And I think when you're the boss and you've got your own business, the more that you can do to show that you genuinely care. Because I know that most MSP owners do care about their staff. It's just they're too busy and too tired to demonstrate that care. And I think of it more as like, if you think about your relationship, and we're not going to talk about you and Hamish, because that would be just the easy thing to do. But, you know, when was the last time Hamish brought you home flowers for no reason? And I don't mean flowers from the petrol station. I mean proper flowers from a florist. Now, it's probably been so many years that if he did it now, you'd instantly think, what have you done wrong? Or what are you going to tell me that I don't like? Well, let me give a better example. Let's say you went to work tomorrow morning and you opened your bag to find that Hamish had put one of your favourite chocolate bars in there, which costs him 70 pence with a little note saying, I love you. And you'd look at that and you'd think, you'd still think he was trying to get something, but you'd look at that and you think, that's a nice thing to do. So what we want is the boss to team member equivalent of giving them a chocolate bar and a little note to show that you care. Because don't give your team a note saying I love you, because you will end up in court at some point.
That's risky.
But it's the boss equivalent of showing that you care. And for me, sending everyone a bottle of wine was an easy way to do that. But you're right, you could actually just send everyone, send them a couple of quid, say get a can of your own beer, and you know let's jump on a Zoom. But it's very much the thought that counts.
On thinking, before we introduce our special guest, overthinking, the perils of overthinking. You were talking on the podcast about why you shouldn't try to do that too much. But also it's kind of tricky because where's the balance? I mean, you do want to be aware and be worried about certain things that could go wrong or certain things that could develop. So when does, attentiveness become overthinking?
That's a really good question. And as I'm getting older and older, I believe that we as humans have lost a great deal of our gut instinct. Well, it's still there. It's just we ignore it. So if you think back to how we were 100,000 years ago, living in caves, and a great deal of our behavior was driven by, I think it's called our limbic system. It's essentially, it's not cognitive thought, it's that gut reaction. So, you know, that thing, have you ever done it where you've walked into a bar, Sophie, and you just instantly feel this isn't the right place for me. It doesn't feel right, or the vibe feels wrong. Something's just
You know me,
off.
I don't go into bars by myself.
20 years ago, then. 20 years ago.
And I sit at home.
Okay, you walk into the crochet club and you're like, the vibe's not quite right here. That's your limbic system. That's your gut feel. And what it is it is actually your brain. Your brain is, in a fraction of a second, is taking into account hundreds of pieces of evidence and immediately jumping to a conclusion. And in that instance, the conclusion is, this is not a safe area, move away. And this is what, of course, we have these skills because our ancestors 100,000 years ago, they had those skills, so they didn't get killed by saber-toothed tigers, so they could breed and ultimately, continue the population, the human population. So we've actually got a very good inbuilt sense about things. And I say to the MSP owners I work with closely a lot, I'll say this, 9 times out of 10, just go with your gut feel. If you've got two candidates, you've interviewed two people, they're both really good on paper, you like both of them, I'll say, which is your gut feel, A or B? And they'll go, oh, it's A. I said, well, higher A. And they're like, oh, well, maybe I should do some more tests, should do some more disc profiles or get them assessed or whatsoever. And that's a pretty good thing to do. But ultimately, you've got to go, I think, 9 times out of 10, you've got to go with what your gut says, because your gut will get it right a lot more times than your overthinking brain will.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest, because I feel like from what I've heard about him on the podcast, he has a good gut feel and lots of things. His gut can detect success. Have you ever been introduced like that before, Simon Marcel? Ever? Simon from S3 Technologies and Propel Your MSP. Now, I was interested in whether you were listening to what Paul said there and a bit about the chat on the podcast about, with like 100 staff that you've got, presumably you don't send them all a bottle of wine, or maybe you do. Like, are there little things that you do with your staff?
We definitely do a lot for our staff. I mean, we believe in the basics to start with. So we really believe in doing a good job at managing people before doing the little things. I know that sounds weird, and I always say like the basics are the most important. So we do one-on-ones religiously every month. We also do a full quarterly evaluation every quarter. We do 360 evals as well. So we do kind of all those basics, and then we do a lot. So we have 2, we call them S-Fests. It was a bit of a joke when it started.
Ooh.
But
I like that. That sounds better than Schlurp and whatever the other thing was.
Zoom and Slurp.
Zoom and Schlurp.
So in the winter we basically have a ski. Well, I mean, with the pandemic, it was a little, we do a ski weekend with all the employees, all their kids, wives, husbands. So we rent basically a resort, and we have a bit of a party, or a big party, I should say, on the Friday, and then skiing on the Saturday, and then we have a bit of a gala on the Saturday night, and we kind of do the same thing at the end of the summer. Where we invite the families, we rent out, usually it's some kind of resort at this point. It was a bit easier when we were smaller, and we usually split people up in teams, and we have a whole event. So we do that, and then we do tons of smaller events. Like recently we had a St. Patrick's Day party after work on a Thursday.
I'm starting to think I'm in the wrong job, and I'm going to get your details from Paul after this. I wanted to ask you as well, because you said on the podcast that you started, when you first started your business, you're incredibly young and you were working out of your apartment. Suddenly here we are in 2022, and a lot of people are going to be working out of their apartments, maybe hybrid, maybe forever. Do you think we're going to see the death of the office, or will you always want team members together like those things you were just describing?
I mean, I think it'll depend on the office, but I think the people who really don't come back might miss out. I think there's a lot of conversations that are going to happen in the office. And I think to really get ahead in the business and to be more involved, I think people will have to have some kind of presence. So what we're doing is we're asking our managers to come in ideally once a week for their team meetings. So hopefully that will happen, but we're not forcing it either. We will see. We surveyed our employees, and I can tell you, I think it was like over 90% said 1 to 0 days a week they wanted to do in the office.
Wow.
And that was the lowest. Maybe we should have actually asked like once a month or once a year,
That leads me on to road mapping, which is something else you talked about on the podcast. And, planning, I think anyone can understand that planning is a good thing, but road mapping, it's almost halfway between planning and predicting the future. I mean, does it go wrong? Is it a case of, like Paul was saying, of trusting your gut? Is it a combination of the two? How do you roadmap confidently?
No, it's something we take seriously. We have a committee. We go through sort of what our general recommendations are, our different solutions. We try not to have too many of them. We like to be standardized. And it's something we review on a quarterly basis internally. So, and then of course, we match those to the client's needs. But I would say we actually try to do it less with the gut and have a system behind it so that we can bring people in and it can scale. When I started, I think I was the one doing it, and I probably used my gut maybe a little too much.
And I guess you learn as well as you go forward. I mean, if you do, maybe I'm not going to say make mistakes, let's not accuse anyone of anything here, but if you do kind of make a roadmap and maybe it veers off that a little bit, is there, have you found ways to adapt and bring it back to what the client wanted, or to encourage them to go off in a different direction, if that's the way the world or the business is going?
It's a very collaborative process. So we do it with the client. We validate sort of what we're going with, the assumptions we have. And in that way, yeah, I mean, it's rarely happened that we've had to really self-correct. I mean, sometimes with the clients, we knew we were taking a risk. Maybe it was something new or a solution that they weren't too sure of. And that was clear from the get-go. And what we'll do actually is we do a lot of proof of concepts. So we'll do a proof of concepts with a couple of their users, see if it works before we go kind of crazy with everyone. Let's say you've got a client, they have 200 people, and you're going to put in a solution that's going to help them collaborate on documents or whatever it may be. Instead of going out and deploying the whole thing, what we'll do is we'll choose a couple of test users and we will deploy what we call a proof of concept project, where we will have them use it for, sometimes it's 2-3 months, and see, and I mean, they're going to validate it as well and see, okay, does it first of all do what we thought it was going to do? And is this something they want to kind of do throughout the enterprise?
So they're like a guinea pig, if you will.
Absolutely. And we're really upfront with the client. We're like, we really think this will work for you, but we're not 100% sure. Or in some cases, maybe we've never implemented the solution. So we'll tell the client, hey, we've never really done this. Why don't we test it with a subgroup of users and see if this works for you? Or sometimes even their needs, they're not 100% sure. So, and I think that's a good way of not getting in trouble. Everybody's expectations are clear. The client understands that, at the end of this, they might have to kind of back out and it won't go forward. But most of the time, I mean, we do the proof of concept, and a lot of times they're even cut short, after 4 or 6 weeks.
So if you know it's going to work, you just foot on the gas and go for it.
Usually the client is the one who says, okay, this is great. We need everybody on this.
Sounds like me. I'm done now. Just get on with it. Yeah. But, unlike generally with me, then that leads to a horrible disaster later on. And it sounds like it doesn't with you guys. So if people want to find out a little bit more about S3 Technologies or Propel Your MSP, or, just coming to work for a company that takes them skiing with their family, give us a little blatant plug for yourself, Simon.
So Propel Your MSP, it's a tool for VCIOs to basically help build roadmaps, budgets, and basically have good strategic planning with their clients. You can check it out at propelyourmsp.com. We've got a freemium, so you can use it for 2 clients, completely free, all features, and really see if it works for you. And after that, it scales. It scales so you can start quite easily. I would really invite MSPs to take a look at our product.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you for joining us. Freemium, Paul. It's another good word. Unlike your Zoom and Schlep, I feel like you could learn a lot from Simon. Snappy titles. We need snappy titles. But then again, I suppose Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast does exactly what it says on the tin.
Exactly. And to be honest, having discovered in the interview with Simon that he has the ability to see the future, because you'll remember from the podcast, he had a managed services model before it existed. He came up with VCIO, or built this before it existed. I want to know what Simon's building right now, and I'm putting money into it. What is it, Simon?
Yes.
Share with us.
So in the MSP, instead of most MSPs will take all kinds of different clients. So what we do is we will take our MSP is quite sizable, so we've broken it down in teams, and we will have one team that's, for example, only handling lawyers and accountants. And that way they gain some experience in that vertical, and we get some credibility, and they'll know the tools, they know the regulations, and they can speak the language of the client. So splitting that up in teams and having your teams on certain verticals and building an expertise.
Clever.
Very clever.
Very clever. Very clever. We hope you've enjoyed it. That's pretty much all we've got time for this week on Another Byte. This is the podcast spin-off. So if you're thinking, what the hell are they talking about? Because it sounds really interesting. You can listen anywhere you get your podcast. You just need to search Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast, and we'll see you again soon for Another Byte.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast.
Another Byte.